All right, so we're going to get on to our next panel. I'm really excited about it. It is Building Ohio at Scale. So give it up for David Feuerstein.
Good morning. I'd like to call out the panelists. Let's have Caroline and David and Tom and Trent all come out in no particular order. So our topic this morning is building Ohio at scale. Before we sort of get into the topic, I'd like everybody to introduce themselves so we can, you guys can get to know us a little bit. As was said, my name is David Feuerstein. I'm a founder and co-managing partner at Feuerstein Kulick, a law firm that has offices in New York and Oakland. We've been in the cannabis space. This is celebrating our 10th year, so we've seen it quite a bit in those 10 years. Feels more like 70, but in any event, if David, you can just go down the line, spend 20 seconds introducing yourselves and tell us what you do.
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be back in Ohio. I've got roots in Cleveland, so it's good to be down south in Cincinnati. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer for Ascend Wellness. I've been in the industry about 10 years. It's great to be back, and thanks for having us.
I'm Caroline Henry. I'm Vice President of Government Affairs for Buckeye Relief. We're an Ohio-only cannabis operator. We're vertically integrated. And I'm also the co-chair of OCAN's Policy Committee.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Trent Woloveck. I too have Ohio roots. I'm born and raised in Columbus, Ohio. Lived here in Cincinnati for a couple years after school. So good to be back and see the Ohio market thriving. Jushi is a multi-state operator. We operate in 8 states. Here in Ohio, we have 7 retail stores, a cultivation and a manufacturing facility. So full vertical integration, and looking forward to continuing to talk about how we grow the Ohio market. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tom Haren. I'm an attorney at Frantz Ward, where I chair our cannabis practice. Frantz Ward's a full-service law firm. We've got about 90 lawyers with offices in Cleveland and Columbus. We've got 6 members on our cannabis practice team. All 6 of us are here today, so please do stop by and say hello. We've been in the space here in Ohio since its inception, and I had the distinct pleasure to serve as the spokesperson as part of the Issue 2 campaign for the, 2.5 years that the campaign ended up being at the end of the day. So looking forward to talking with everybody.
Well, as of today, cannabis is still a state-regulated and predominantly state-run business, and it's highly regulated. And I think in order to discuss how you would scale a business that's highly regulated, you have to talk a little bit about the regulations and the regulator. So one question for each of the sort of panelists: what's Ohio's regulation or regulator doing right now in order to enable cannabis companies to scale in Ohio?
I'll go
Just
first.
Volunteer. Yeah, go ahead.
I think the biggest thing that our regulator, the Ohio Division of Cannabis Control, does well is we have a wonderful dialogue with them from an industry perspective. And I don't think that dynamic is replicated in every state across the country. They are accessible to our licensees. They're accessible to the law firms that represent the licensees. And while we may not agree with them on every single policy position they take, and in fact we disagree with them on a whole lot of policy positions they take, they're always accessible to explain the rationale and try to find a workable solution without completely upsetting the market at any given point. And I think that is so important in a market that is as dynamic and ever-changing as the cannabis industry is. We at least have an open door policy with our regulator.
Just following up on that, Tom, are you able to sort of see the regulator ahead of time if you see issues coming down the road to sort of predict to them and help guide the industry through that before you actually hit the bump in the road?
Yeah, absolutely. And Caroline can certainly talk about this. Like the division, they attend the OCAN meetings. Was it 2 out of every 3 months? They're in person with us, and they lay out for us, hey, this big policy change is coming. we think you're probably going to hate it, but we think it's necessary to address, whatever the issue is.
We spend a lot of time working back and forth with them. Since adult use came into effect, they've been working on rule packages for, I'd say, 2 years. We're in rule package 7, which is really rule package 8, because there's a 6A and a 6B. But we spend a lot of time talking to them about the rules and how they're really going to impact operators in practical application. It's a great dialogue, like Tom mentioned, and it depends on the issue. Sometimes they are very reasonable and understand the business perspective, but other times they have, policy reasons or political reasons that they want to do things a certain way. So we don't always win, but we have a great dialogue.
I can't tell you folks who are just in Ohio how lucky you are to have a regulator like that, because I can tell you that it's not like that in every state. I won't name states for fear of retribution, but I can promise you that there are states out there where the regulator is simply not as welcoming and sort of inviting to deal with these issues. They have their plan, they want their plan to go forward, and they'll run over anybody to get that plan executed.
Yeah, and the thing that I would add is, in addition to the transparency up front and through the process of rollout of regs, what they also do better than any other state that we're operating in, we're in 7, they're incredibly responsive. So there's very rarely a time where they are not answering questions and providing clarity to regs, guidelines, rules within a week. And if it extends beyond the week, they're being very mindful to pull together thought leaders in the industry in their areas of expertise to get back to us with a very thoughtful response. Because at the end of the day, we just have to plan for it. And then we have to execute in field. And as an operator, that for me is what I want to do to protect customers, to protect our consumers, and to educate.
Trent, you look like you were jumping in to say something a second ago.
Yeah, I would pretty much reiterate what David said. I would just add, while we don't feel like the adult use got stood up as quick as it should, we all have to take a step back and appreciate that we actually got it stood up and the market rolled out. And, both from an operational perspective, but also from a regulator perspective, we're kind of flying the plane as we built it. And so that's not an easy thing to do. And I think, as the industry, we've gotten used to that, quite frankly, since, I had a store open on January 1st in 2014 in Denver, Colorado. And trust me, there were a lot of bumps in the road. And you'd think we would have figured that out 11, 12 years later, but every state is different. And so you have to continue to roll with the punches. And as everybody alluded to, that open line of communication, I can tell you, in the 7 other states that we operate in, it's a nightmare. Pennsylvania, I think we've had to go up against the DOH there, the Department of Health, 10 plus times in court. And so that doesn't seem to be the case here in Ohio. And so we think that, we're going to continue to build this program here in Ohio the right way. Plenty of growth still to come with, pricing coming down to compete against, the state up north. I still refuse to say that name, even though I haven't lived here for a while, but IO.
I didn't know you hated Minnesota that bad.
Yeah, that's like northwest. I'm talking due north. And so I think, in taking a step back and looking at it high level, we've done a great job in standing up a state-regulated adult use cannabis market here with the regulators and as an industry. And look, nothing comes easy in this space. And so there's a lot of education and a lot of nuance. And so we're going to keep pushing on all fronts to make sure that becomes a reality for both patients here in Ohio, but also consumers over the age of 21.
So let's take for a moment the flip side of that question. And I'm not going to ask you to tell me what the regulator did poorly, but if you could have one wish for the day and you could sort of wave your wand and have something either looking forward or currently, what would you change in Ohio either to enable scale or to perpetuate the business as it's going today? And you can go in any order you want, just volunteer and speak up.
I think I would like to see the regulator and law enforcement get educated around what Senate Bill 56 does, and I think that would allow the state regulated market to continue to have that growth pattern.
Trent, just for the uneducated, what Senate Bill 56 is?
Well, it was clarification and brought in line Ohio with what the federal law is around intoxicating hemp or just hemp. So that was part of it, and it updated some rules for the state regulated industry as well. And so that was kicked in at the end of March. And so I think, we kind of estimated the market to be around $1 billion sold through smoke, vape, hemp stores here in the state of Ohio. And so that's a lot of dollars that was unregulated, untaxed, untested, unage-gated. And so being able to bring that back into the regulated market allows us as the businesses to scale to meet that demand, which in turn will bring down pricing so that, again, we can continue to grow this market responsibly and bring people into the regulated market.
When I think of what Ohio could do differently, I think it's important to stop looking at all the other states as examples. I think the cannabis industry, when we all came into this, we're trying to prove we're good operators, we're good actors, we're not criminals. So we were willing to accept all these rules and regulations that are so restrictive that it makes it impossible to really operate like a normal business. And we've gotten in this habit of always comparing other states, looking at what is every other state doing? What kind of testing are they doing? Hey, they thought this was a good idea, so let's do it over here too. And we're just compounding our regulations. It's more and more regulations every year. Rule packages are 79 pages. I think if Ohio really wants to lead and to be different, they need to stop comparing to other states and say, what do we actually need to do to put safe products in the market for our consumers and to allow our businesses to thrive? Because if we keep compounding regulations, the cost of cannabis is going to get crazier than it is today. So I think if we could just get to a place where regulations were reasonable and the minimum necessary to have strong businesses and safe products, that would be the best thing we could accomplish.
Yeah, and just to build on that, what I would say is if you can find a mechanism to consolidate the rule packages, whether it's on a time basis or a scope basis, it will really, I think, reduce the churn in trying to understand what various rule packages are, how they thread back to previously approved packages, and then if you can create a time cadence to it where, let's say, every springtime the comprehensive rule set is going to be released, it's going to be put into place, it's going to be activated against, and then you revisit it in the fall, and where there's gaps or opportunities, you tweak, and then you re-release every spring. I think if we can get the state of Ohio to that place, it'll help operators, it'll help the actual regulators in terms of consistency of messaging, and it will absolutely, I think, have downstream positive implications for patients.
Tom, help me out here as the other lawyer on the panel. I mean, regulations are important. I mean, you are dealing still with a drug. It's at best a Schedule III drug right now. We do have to have safety protocols. So tell me, I mean, is the answer for Ohio's success to shrink the regulations tremendously and just to allow the businesses to thrive, or is there some balance that has to be struck here?
Yeah, I think there's always a balance to strike, and I don't want my inner libertarian to come out too much here, but yeah, I think there are areas where some of our regulations are functions of inertia. To Caroline's point, when Ohio built its program initially in 2016, we looked at Illinois and some of these other states, and we sort of copied and hodgepodged together a lot of these different concepts. that now are just kind of in there, right? And so like an example I'll give on an area that I would love to see Ohio and also lots of other states kind of dial back their level of oversight is, non-regulated functions of the business like changes of ownership and transactions. So, Ohio, we're talking about how do you scale in Ohio. We talked about on one of our pre-calls, almost everybody who operates in Ohio has scaled, either through acquisition or organic expansion of their business. Like, we have a pretty good framework here in Ohio. We're the 7th largest state by population, 7th largest by GDP. We're a generally business-friendly state. But when we look at marijuana as a function of marijuana being federally illegal until, maybe 10 days ago in most instances, we've had to deal with the Cole Memorandum priorities, and you have to ensure that like the businesses are not fronts for cartels, and we do background checks and all of these things. So as a requirement of that compliance with the Cole Memo, states have to build in these processes to validate who owns a business. You can't change ownership of a business before you get regulatory approval. Everybody's got to get background checked, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And like in Ohio, where that really came to a head is, when the state first gives you a license, it's a provisional license. And then you got to build the thing before you can get your certificate of operation, and you cannot have any change of ownership or control during that provisional period. Well, anybody who's developed any marijuana license knows that provisional period is a nightmare, and it always takes longer than you think. And so what companies have to do to get funding or to complete an acquisition, like you sign all of these, sometimes 15 agreements during a provisional phase to comply with the non-transferability requirements, and then you sit there for 18 months or 2 years before you close. And it's this weird scenario where it's like 90-day fiance in the business world, right? Like you marry somebody that you just met, and then 2 years later, you're like, they brush their teeth wrong, they don't load the dishwasher correctly, like and it makes...
This is about scaling Ohio, Tom.
But we don't need that. Like, that's a level of oversight that, it's not a criticism of the division. I understand why that rule is in place, but particularly as we look to rescheduling, that is an area that I think Ohio can sort of lead the way to reduce oversight of like normal business operations, normal business changes, while still ensuring that products are tested, we're not selling to kids, the products are safe, et cetera.
So what can people in the audience today take away as to how they can help drive Ohio to be more efficient, to be better at scaling their businesses, and how can they help each of you in being able to sort of go to the regulator and get things done and get to scale?
I'll start. Never put a microphone in a lawyer's hands and then ask a question. The biggest thing is, if you're not already a member of OCAN, join OCAN. OCAN is, without a question, the leading voice on Ohio marijuana policy. They've got the ears of the regulator, they have the ears of a number of people in the legislature, and it's really the primary group where you get feedback from all of these operators from all over the country to really identify best practices from these other states, so that if the division says, hey, we see that Pennsylvania is proposing this rule, that's interesting, we never even thought that was a problem. It's nice to have somebody in the room that says that's because it's not a problem in Ohio, right? They're doing something in Pennsylvania because they have a unique issue that you don't need to just add to the regulations here.
Yeah, for me, I think we need to bring the voice of the consumer and the patient forward. If you think about some of the stats that were rattled off earlier today in the headset presentation, $1 billion rolling in 12 months. How many transactions does that equate to across the 204 stores? It's a lot. It's a lot. And our patients are talking to us every single day in the dispensaries, telling us what's bothering them about the program, telling us where there's some opportunity. They want to celebrate the plant. That's why we're all here, is in celebration of the plant. And I think there's an opportunity to do that and bring that to OCAN and the appropriate forums to really elevate what we're all doing here. And that's selling cannabis and experiencing it and bringing people together. That's why we're in this business. So for me, yes, there's the legal, the compliance, the regulatory, but let's put our patient forward hat on and bring that voice forward.
Well, there's no way to compete with that answer. That was a great one. I think data is important. I think that a lot of the decisions our regulator is making are based on either fear that they're not, following what everyone else is doing, and should we be, and is it going to cause a problem in the future, or fear that if we don't test for all these new things that someone's going to get hurt, even though there's no data to support it, or if they don't reduce the THC potency of certain products that someone's going to get hurt, again, even though no one has ever died from consuming cannabis. I think data is a really important thing for people to bring. If there are products that aren't good in the marketplace, tell us. If there are policies that aren't good, tell us. But without real data, and I don't think that the state is making informed decisions. They're making more like just fear of missing out on everybody else is doing it decisions.
Yeah, well, FOMO is a powerful force, so you have an answer, Trent? Otherwise, we'll move on to the next.
I would just say, in the cannabis space, there's a lot of misinformation that floats around. A lot of people want to, jump to conclusions or, not understand the dynamics of state level, federal level, local level, legislation, regulations. And so, I think it's on us to all be responsible, not spread any misinformation, and, consult with people that actually know what they're talking about within the space, and continue to push forward.
So with the remaining time left, let's sort of address the bigger news of recent times, which is medical cannabis has been rescheduled to Schedule 3.
State regulated medical cannabis.
State regulated medical cannabis is Schedule 3. And there's a hearing that's going to happen in a few months with respect to adult use also being moved to Schedule 3. And we can have a debate when we're done with the panel as to how you could possibly find it's not Schedule 3, but that's a different topic. In talking about scaling Ohio, how do you view the rescheduling order and the future rescheduling order, and what should Ohio do either to insulate itself or participate in what will ultimately be or potentially be interstate commerce?
Yeah, I think that's a loaded question, and
I'm not here to make it easy for you, Trent.
and it'll go back to my last point. This is fresh. Final rule just got posted on Tuesday of this week, and so a lot of people are going to read, put out opinions, but again, do your homework. Talk to people that actually are subject matter experts, specifically in federal and state law. Not a plug for lawyers, but I'm not one either. But
Thanks anyway.
yeah. Actually, we won't go down that rabbit hole. But again, I think here in Ohio it's unique because you have a dual use license, and so you have both medical and adult use being sold under the same license, and so a lot of questions there. But taking a step back and not getting lost in the minutia of rescheduling. First and foremost, I was in DC at the beginning of this week, up and through yesterday, and the conversation and the momentum that I'm having with the Hill is insanely different. The normalization of cannabis now with the rescheduling being done is very real. And so I think you're going to see totally different demeanors from legislators, from regulators, from governors. New governor here in Ohio this November, Vivek, and I'm drawing a blank on who the other person
Amy
is.
Acton.
Yeah, Amy. And so, look and listen to see how they start talking and continue to talk about cannabis, because I think, Republicans, now have a little bit of a different calculus, some more cover, if you will, to actually be able to share what and how they're thinking about it, because it's now a Schedule III narcotic, which is extremely different than a Schedule I narcotic. And so I think for Ohio and every other state, it's important to remember how this business, state licensed businesses were built at the state level. And I do think that that's going to carry for quite some time.
Tom, are you telling all of your Ohio vertical in businesses to just go strict medical to avoid 280E?
No, we're not. The part of our calculus is, let someone else be first through the breach for the next couple of weeks, and see what happens. I don't think there's anything magical about applying today versus 14 days from now. And a state like Ohio is unique, right? Because we're a dual use licensed state. The DEA hasn't really said how they're going to apply the executive order, which only really allows companies to register if they have a state license to produce or sell marijuana for medical purposes. Well, that's all of the licensees in Ohio, because we're all dual use. And so I think there is a very compelling argument, I think it's the correct argument, that a dual use licensee qualifies as a state medical marijuana license holder under the executive order. It just so happens that our licenses also allow us to sell for adult use. But I think we hit the definition of a medical marijuana license holder under the executive order. I don't know if the DEA agrees with that or not, but one thing that I think Ohio policymakers and regulators can do to help the industry scale is to provide some cover to the licensees, right? That at least in the state's view, our licensees qualify under this executive order. I expect they will qualify when, I do think state licensed adult use will eventually be Schedule III when the process is completed. So, maybe we're only solving for the next 4 or 5 months here at this point, and we'll finally get that clarity, but we don't necessarily have it today. And then the other thing I think that the state can start doing now is evaluating Ohio's regulatory environments as compared to other states. Because when we get on this topic of potential interstate commerce, that to me is going to be the driving decision about whether that interstate commerce is permissible or not.
Right, so just to expand on Tom's point for a second, one way that a state can insulate itself from interstate commerce is by pointing to other states and their regulations as being insufficient to meet their standards. So by way of example, if New York doesn't test for lead or nickel in its product, Ohio could say, we're not going to allow the import of cannabis into Ohio from New York because their products aren't tested to our standards. So with that sort of backdrop, Caroline, is it better to get rid of these regulations now, or should we keep them on the books so that we have something that we can use to insulate Ohio against other states?
And to be clear, I'm not a fan of getting rid of regulation. I'm a fan of getting rid of regulation that doesn't make sense. I'm a fan of smart regulation. But I think Ohio is in no danger of that. We have one of the strictest programs.
Tom just breathed a sigh of relief.
We have an exceptionally strict program. I don't know that any other state is doing what we're doing, so I'm not concerned that they're going to be able to meet our standards, even if we implement significant reductions in regulations.
So I'll leave the last questions to David and Trent as multi-state operators in the rescheduling, and how do you view sort of the potential for interstate commerce, across the country, whether it's just in state-approved medical or ultimately state-approved adult use?
I think for me, the insulation is important, but we have to be open to it, especially when it comes to biomass coming into the state. There's a lot of restrictions there, but I think we have to be aware, but we also have to be conscious that we spent a lot of time building these markets. We spent a lot of time and energy, and these markets, especially Ohio, and money, are very successful. So for me, we're trying to get educated. We haven't ferreted out what the new federal regs mean and rules mean, but we're gonna pivot. We're gonna use it as an arbitrage opportunity wherever we can. But we've got to insulate the businesses that we've created here in Ohio and other states.
Trent, you have 45 seconds.
I don't even need that much time. I wish the people good luck who decide to try to do interstate commerce with rescheduling.
Well, thank you all the panelists, and thank you guys for being such a great audience. We'll be around the rest of the day. Come say hello, and we look forward to meeting you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, give it up for Building Ohio at Scale. That was a great panel. I love the line about how it's not about regulation, it's about the right regulations. All